In this episode, join us as we venture into the realm of exoskeleton technology with Kennelly of German Bionic. We talk about the evolution of German Bionic's exoskeleton suits, which are revolutionizing workplace safety. Megan and I also explore the boundless potential of these exoskeleton suits in shaping the future of work across many industries. And if you've ever wanted to have your own Iron Man suit, you'll definitely enjoy this episode. Tune in. Megan, I really love the exoskeleton suit. I'm amazed that I didn't hear that it had won an award at CES for the most innovative, but how did German Bionic initially identify the need for an exoskeleton technology in the industrial setting?
Yeah, so basically going back in time a little bit, like 8-10 years ago, the whole company started from one of our founders who was part of a research study. And this was basically a European funded research study that wanted to tackle the issues of musculoskeletal issues and injuries within the workplace specifically. So he had a background in robotics and hardware technology. He was part of a team and they built the first exoskeleton to help basically solve that issue because it's one of the leading causes of injury within the manual labor fields and was starting to become more and more of a problem for not only people and organizations, but also starting to become an issue on a larger scale of keeping people in the workplace and staffing people and all of that kind of stuff. So that's really where it stemmed from.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, we didn't have the hard hat until the early 20th century, and now that's just kind of a requirement and an expectation. But I just think maybe the technology wasn't around or it hadn't been evolved enough yet. And I know this is the 6th iteration of the exoskeleton at this point now, right? So there's obviously been a lot of growing pains along the way, but in positive ways, of course. So could you walk us through that development process of the different versions of the exoskeletons from concept to, obviously now you have a market ready product?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny to see where it started and where it looks like now. It looks like a completely different product. And I feel like what it looks like now is super commercialized. But when you go back to the very first one that was part of the research study, it's like, okay, this looks very robotic and very
Iron Man-ish.
Yeah, like you're seeing basically everything in the suit. So what they did was when they first started and said, okay, I think this is actually a business, the user was really top of mind in everything that they did from the development perspective. So yes, a company is going to be the buyer, but the user is the one that's wearing it. And that's where you need to get the adoption and everything. So with every iteration that we've had, it's really stemmed from the user, their feedback, the tickets that they've put in from a support perspective, and we've changed it to make it more comfortable, the usability is going to be easier for them to put it on and make it more comfortable to wear throughout the day. So just for an example, from our 5th generation to the one that we have now, a lot of the feedback that we got was in more hot environments. The top part, the vest, was getting a little bit sweaty. So one of the changes that they made was in the 6th generation, we have more of a mesh material for the vest to make it more breathable. Another thing that we had from a feedback perspective was it was a little bit hard to change the battery yourself. So because our device is an active exoskeleton, it runs off of battery power. So what we did was we changed the battery to be from the top, right behind the back, to be down near the waist, to be not only more ergonomic from the weight perspective and the distribution, but it also makes it easier for the user to take it out and put a new one in themselves without having to ask someone else. So little things like that make a huge difference just from each iteration that come out. And with each iteration, there's many, many things that just go into making it more comfortable for the user and making it easier for them to wear it throughout the day.
That makes perfect sense. And user feedback is the best way to make those things happen. Like
Absolutely.
Any new tool that you give to a worker, if it's not going to work for them or if it's going to make their job harder in any aspect, they're just not going to adopt it. So listening to that feedback, especially like the battery thing, I could see where someone's midway through a job and it dies and all they're doing is cursing that exoskeleton suit until they're able to do it themselves. it's like everything else, like you're saying, you're here to save people's backs and to make sure that they can still go home and pick up their kids and
Yeah,
live their life to a full capacity. So, with
absolutely.
that being said, what specific challenges is German Bionic looking to aim to address with the exoskeletons, and how does the exoskeleton bring solutions that benefit businesses?
Sure. So I would say we kind of look at the industries in two different landscapes. One is from a more industrial setting, and the other, which is a new one for us, is healthcare. So looking at the industrial setting, it really stemmed, and where we got our start from was logistics. So there are a lot of pieces within the logistic process where it still requires manual handling for heavy, repetitive lifts constantly throughout the day. Things like palletizing, having to take goods off of trucks and put them on pallets or put them on shelves. A lot of this, right now, you're seeing more automation, but there's still some of those tasks that it's not quite there yet. There's still a lot of flexibility that's needed, whether it be from a weight perspective or a size perspective, and in the things that they're having to move, or it simply is just something like we've seen big rolled up rugs where maybe not the best for an automized system, or an automized system is just really expensive to implement. So we sort of see our solution as this hybrid automation where you can keep people in those roles where you need them, but you're keep giving them additional tools to keep them safe and to make their jobs easier. So that's really where the benefit comes from the organization perspective, from an efficiency standpoint, from a profitability standpoint, but you're also getting the safety aspect where you're giving the workers support and you're giving them power so that you're reducing injuries, you're reducing sick days, hopefully seeing a reduction in workers' comp claims. So there's endless sort of KPIs from an organization perspective, but I think there's also soft KPIs, like you would say, where employees are happier. They're able to go home, like you said, and play with their kids and have hobbies outside of work instead of having to go home and ice their backs and take a rest and not be able to enjoy their lives. So staffing people, keeping people retained and happy in their jobs, I think that's also something that should be mentioned when we talk about like the benefits.
Yeah, I could really see where anywhere where you have to lift any sort of heavy things like warehousing, food processing, logistics, distribution, those are all going to be key players here. And I think, based on one of the things that you said there, it's easy for us to try to remove humans right now. That seems to be the modern fad. But machines in and of themselves are not intelligent. So taking the intelligence out of the situation isn't always the best
No,
solution.
you need creativity, you need flexibility. If you have an alarm, people just react, I think, quicker, whereas an automated system is doing the same thing over and over. So there
Right.
is something to be said for keeping people in their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, could you share some of the real world examples or case studies where these exoskeletons have made a huge impact or on workplace safety or productivity, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a variety of testimonials and case studies that people can go and look up on our website. One of the ones that I always like to talk about, just because I was there when we did a case study for them, was up in Canada, one of the Canadian tire factories. They went through this entire relaunch of their operations. They did a huge renovation of their storefront. So they went basically tripled in size from their storefront. And that also meant that their warehouse almost doubled, tripled in size as well. And part of that, they integrated some new technologies from an automation standpoint. They put new technologies in the storefront to help find things, but they still had a gap where their workers were still having to do some of that manual lifting. Like I said, the taking up goods off of a truck, that was still one of the things where they had someone every single morning that was part of his shift. The trucks come in and it needed to be offloaded and put onto the conveyor system. And so they were like, what can we do here? We've invested all of this technology. We have this huge new store opening, but we still have this gap where we want to see if there's something out there that can help sort of bridge this gap of keeping him safe and making it easier for him. And they found us from a Google search, actually, and
Wow.
sort of led to a consultation of what's the device. Let's bring it on site. Let's try it. And I think it really was a testament of them being open-minded to this type of technology. I think they were like, hey, we've implemented all this innovation throughout our store. Like, why not be open to something like this? So I think it was a testament of like them being willing to take a chance on something and us being like the experts and saying like, yep, let's take a look at your operations. We think this is going to help you here, here, here. Went on site, did a demo, worked great. The employees loved it. And I actually got to go out afterwards, after it was implemented, and we did a case study with them. And it was nice to hear from the employees directly and sort of see the operations, how they did it, and they just loved it. And I think it was sort of a testament to the product, but also a testament to just being like open to implementing something like this.
That's a perfect use case for it too. So I actually changed 18-wheeler tires as an 18-year-old, and it was brutal. I would get home after an 8 to 10 hour shift, and I would just be dead to the world. And I was 18, so I mean,
Yeah,
you're easier to spring back to life at that age. I couldn't
right.
imagine doing it in 30s and
Your whole
40s.
career.
Trying to come home, your whole career. Yeah, of course you're going to get used to it, but all I was given was this weird metal lever to try to lift these 100-pound tires, and something like this suit would be amazing to just be able to pick it up,
Yeah,
put it right where it
tires is
goes.
definitely one of the industries where we've seen either it's bringing them up and lifting them and changing the tires, or just from a pure logistics perspective. Another example, GeoPost over in the Nordic region, they just simply had to move stacks of tires and put it on the conveyor system to be shipped out. And they came in like 2-3 packs each. And that's someone that had to literally lift them constantly throughout the day. So if they can get like just additional support for that and make it a little bit easier, I can't imagine the relief of having to do that. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's crazy. So for the exoskeleton suits themselves, for the end user, like tell me what are some of the things that make it user friendly or makes it even easily integrated into what a day-to-day workflow would look like?
Sure. So it kind of depends on the situation. So we have people that wear it their entire shifts because they're having to do lifting for 8 hours a day. But we also have people that are only doing lifting for an hour of their shift. So what's nice is with our device, we have a pin system. So if you have, let's say you have operations where different workers throughout the day are having to do lifting for an hour. So you have maybe 2-3 devices, and your worker can go up and say, all right, I have to do some heavy lifting now. I'm going to go grab the device. It's basically like going up and grabbing another tool. So you grab it, put it on, takes less than 30 seconds to put on once you're trained. And they basically can just use it like they would grabbing a forklift or any other tool throughout their day. And the way it works is you kind of wear it like a hiking backpack. So all of the weight is sitting on your hips. You're not getting any additional force on your shoulders. So you basically clip it around your waist. You zip up the little vest part, and then you have leg connectors, which basically act as like an anchor point for the device. There's 2 motors on either side. So when you go down to bend to pick something up, the device is basically using its sensors and gyroscope and all that good stuff to sense that you're going and coming back up. And it's all about using the motors and helping you come back to that upright position. And the motors are helping to take the weight off of the user's back. And that's really where they're seeing the relief. And then throughout the fitting of the device, it's also keeping your body in an ergonomic position as well. So you're getting the support, but also the power every time you go and do a lift.
That makes sense. So I saw a video about it. So I'm assuming it's a one-size-fits-all type of technique. So it looks like it has like a ratcheting system. So
Yes,
would
so the
one
device
person be able to take it off and just hand it to another person?
yes and no. So the vest connections and the leg connections come in different sizes, anywhere from small to triple XL. So the device itself, the motor system that we call like the main unit, that can be shared amongst all your workers. But we recommend that every worker has their own vest and leg connections. And then that way the device is going to fit them a little bit better. But so you can still go on. The vest just clips into the device, and the leg connections again just clip right in. So it's super easy to interchange your personal like fittings, but the actual structure and unit can be shared amongst different people.
And then you mentioned there's a pin system. So I'm assuming that's to learn the end user's kind of style or what they do throughout a day. Is there a website or like a portal that they would utilize to be able to see those type of things? Talk to me about it.
Yeah, so the pin system basically has two functions. From a user perspective, the device is going to remember your settings, so you can adjust the power from a lifting perspective and also going to set things down so you get resistance. That's also helping to guide you back down so that it's not putting pressure on your back. So every time you put your pin in, the device is recognizing, okay, these are the settings that this person has found to be comfortable. We're going to automatically put it on those settings. But there's AI in there too that's also learning from that pin to make the device more suited and comfortable for the wearer. Everyone has a little bit of a different way that they move, and so the device is learning every time you put in that pin. From the organization perspective, we have a data insights platform where the company can start to learn more about their ergonomics, their safety from different users. So it's all a PIN system, so it's all anonymized. It's GDPR compliant. We're a European company, so we have to make sure that all of that is up to snuff. But it really can give some insights on how much are my users walking throughout the day, how much are they lifting, how many of those lifts are good lifts versus bad lifts. You can start to identify, all right, if all of these workers are having to walk miles and miles throughout the day, is there any way that I can change around my workplace so that they're having to walk less within their jobs? That's making it more efficient. They're able to do things quicker. You can also start to understand, all right, I have this group of workers that's not necessarily lifting as properly as they probably should. Is this a training issue where we need to go back and do some training? Or is it an environment issue where maybe they're too tight of a quarter where they're having to do more twisting to make it work? Can I change the environment to make it more safe? So there's certain things that they can learn from the insights. And that's what's nice about having it be connected is we can add features to the software. And again, that's where we work with customers to say like, hey, what's beneficial to you? What do you want to see? What can we implement? And that's how we learn and just continue to add to the software aspect of it too.
That's really great added benefit too. So not only are you just trying to keep the workers safe, but you're really trying to work hand in hand with the customers to optimize their environment to make the most use out of everything, most use out of their day, most use out of their workers. That's a great benefit for anybody working with German Bionic. So, question I guess is, are there other exoskeleton technologies out there in the market right now? And what sets German Bionic apart from the others that are in the market?
Yeah, so when you look at exoskeletons, I mean, from a high level, you kind of have to start with there's rehabilitation exoskeletons that are there to help people that already have injuries. There, and then there's the side of we are kind of the preventative exoskeletons. So we fall within that bucket. Within that bucket, you have passive systems and active systems. Passive systems are using things like strings and pulleys and a person's own body force and mass to give that energy and support. Active systems are using robotics, they're using batteries, they're using motors to help give support. The main difference between them is kind of use case. So something like an active system is going to give you more weight compensation. So every time you pick something up, our device specifically gives you 30 kilograms or 66 pounds of weight compensation. A passive system is going to give you support and some of compensation, but maybe not as much. So if you're doing lighter lifting throughout the day, an active system might be too much for you. So it kind of depends on your use case and what's going to be best for you. When you look at active systems, I think the fact that we're connected and have that data insights platform, that's what sets us apart from other systems. What's also nice is the sharing component. Some other active systems that are out there are designed specifically for that worker. If you want to have it swapped to another worker, it needs to be recalibrated and reset for that worker. So you kind of have to make sure that every worker has their own suit. Whereas ours, you can kind of share the device. Like I said, if you're not doing lifting your entire shift, you can share that device amongst the different workers in the shift that are having to do lifting that day, or if they're having to do it for just an hour. That kind of helps to make it more of a easier integration into the operations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know this one was called apogee. So I think of space terms when I hear apogee, which is the furthest distance in an orbit away from the Earth. But I would assume that that means kind of the ultimate version of this exoskeleton. But What's the ongoing approach for research and development for continuously improving these exoskeletons to stay further ahead in the industry right now?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we pride ourselves on is always being at that level where we are so far ahead in innovation, in manufacturing, and scalability, and we want to make sure that we keep that position. So whatever we can do from like a strategic partnership perspective, we recently partnered with Mubea, who is one of the largest auto body part providers. I think almost every car that's on the road has a piece from Mubea. The reason that we did that was because they have experts in manufacturing, but they also are experts in lightweight components. And part of what we always want to do is get lighter and leaner in the suit that sits on the body. So having that strategic partnership helps not only from a scalability perspective, but also from a development perspective. I think we're always like we talked about, because we've been around so long and have lots of customers, having those connections with the customers and listening to the feedback with every single iteration. I think that has been really helpful in keeping us ahead of the game, where we're seeing, okay, what challenges are you seeing? What data do you want to get? What are the other systems that you're working with where we can start to identify, okay, could we maybe have an API to fit into that system from a software perspective? So it's listening to the users, it's listening to the customers to make sure that we're always keeping those different audiences in mind, because if you're only building it for the organization, you're going to lose out on the adoption perspective from the user. If you're only listening to the user, the organization is going to say, okay, well, how is this going to help from a day to day? How am I going to be able to have a KPI from an investment perspective? So I think because we're really great at listening to the customer and working with them, that's helped us in the past. And that's what we want to do in the future too, is make sure that we're always ahead of what the challenges are, what do the users want to see, what's happening in the market. So we have a phenomenal team of developers in Germany that are just always thinking about the user, thinking about the customer, and seeing what else is out there and staying in tune with new technologies, new innovations, all of that stuff, because it all stems into staying ahead of the game.
Yeah, of course. You mentioned you can't just listen to the user, you can't just listen to the company. And I don't want to pigeonhole this exoskeleton into just lifting heavy things either. You mentioned earlier that it's starting to be utilized in healthcare. Is that because of the ability to help the end user utilize their legs? Could this be used in the healthcare side for helping people who maybe have had a recent accident or relearning how to walk? Like,
So it's
what are the upcoming
less,
innovations on that side?
yeah, so it's less of the rehabilitation side, like I mentioned before. We're still on the preventative side in the healthcare. We actually had the healthcare come to us, if you will.
Oh,
So when it started, when COVID started and there was a lot of pressure on nurses, we actually had a good connection with one of the main hospitals in Berlin and had these discussions of what are you seeing from a day to day, and it actually came up that this could be a potential solution for nurses, healthcare workers that are working in elderly homes, physical therapy, because a lot of that work is driven by them having to lift patients. And the solutions that are out there now are kind of, I say, not patient friendly. Things like those big cranes that they have to bring in to lift patients, or when it's having to be the nurse, they're having a lot of pressure from the patient having to touch them and pull on them to help pick them up. So with the device, it's nice because they can put it on, they can use it in their morning shift when they're having to move patients from the bed to the chair, if they're having to put a patient into a wheelchair and wheel them to a test. It's giving them more support and power, but it's also, there's handles on the back of the device. So the patient, it's getting them a little less personal. And they actually feel like they're helping with the lift rather than just being useless. So I think it's bringing more of a human side to that task. And I think about in the future, I'm like, I wouldn't want to be lifted by a crane or a robot that's having to move me around. So it keeps that personal perspective in the nursing and the caring industry, but we're also giving them the support that they need. And I think they're super appreciative of.
yeah. I think about taking away the human aspect in that one and care. Like I could see a lot easier pulling out the human intelligence and lifting a tire, right? But when you're
Sure.
talking about personalized care, like that's one where you really have to be able to be on your toes and think
Right.
quickly, or just not do the exact same thing over and over and again, because it's not always a repetitive task. It could be
No.
slightly different every single time that you're
Yeah, and
in
every
there.
person is different and their needs are
Oh,
different.
yeah, so those things I couldn't see where we would be completely eliminating humans from that part. I think that's a great use case for it. I never really thought through it like that before, but just like you were saying, it's some of the tools are archaic. It's like me trying to change those tires with that heavy metal thing, right? Instead of having something that would make this a lot
Yeah,
easier.
it's interesting to see like the use cases that pop up that we might not have even thought of. We're working with a commercial roofing company up in Canada as well, and they're having to carry these big stacks of the tiles that go on the roof. And it was like, okay, well, we've worked with some other constructions that are having to like lay bricks, but roofing, I would have never thought of that. So it's interesting to see the use cases that come up where it's like, well, I do heavy repetitive lifts. Let's see if this works in this use case and see if it's a solution for us. So it's nice to see the verticals that are coming out, and it just continues to grow. And I think it's fun to see where else this could continue to be implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if a company was doing a repetitive task, like you were saying, what's the best way for them to get started? Would they start with one suit to test it out, see what it would work for them, or do you tend to do like I don't know, like if you have 3 shifts, you would do 10 for a shift? Like, what does that look like?
I think again it varies. What's nice about the process is we have our team. They're really going to be the consultants, and they've seen this warehouse after warehouse and different sort of operations, and they know where this is going to work and where it's not going to work. So basically what the process is we can either go on site, take a look at the operations, or it's as easy as sending them a video of, hey, this is where I think I need it. Can you take a look at the task and see, is this something where it's going to help? Typically we look for certain weights. We really want it to be over 20 kilograms or about 35 pounds for it to be where you're going to see the most value from it. We also look at, is this something where you're taking it from the floor to waist level? We really don't provide any support for overhead lifting. So we want to see basically like shoulder down, those types of things that they're looking at of, okay, is the device actually going to be helpful? And then from there, we'll go on site and actually have the users test it for a couple hours, a day, to make sure that, okay, yep, this use case. So it's really about validating the use case, and fitting the device comes later when we do the onboarding. So once you figure out how many suits you need, what tasks are going to use the suit, that's really where they're going to decide how many and who is going to benefit from the device. And then once we implement it, we have an onboarding team that helps come make sure that the fit is perfect. Like I said, there's different sizes to make sure that everyone's fitted with their own vests, their leg pads, and really talk about the adoption of it, because this is a technology that, again, people aren't very familiar with. So if we can help overcome some of the challenges of implementing this type of device, giving them tips and tricks on, okay, wear it an hour the first day, then maybe wear it for 2 hours after a couple days, so that your body's starting to get used to it. There's little things, I think, with implementing any new technology where there's, I don't want to call it like a fear of it, but there's an unknown of, I don't know what I don't know. So that's really where we are there to be the coach of, here's the things to look out for. They might, after a couple weeks, say, well, I don't need this, but it's really about educating about the long-term benefits, that kind of stuff.
You definitely do see that adversity to change sometimes whenever
Of
you're
course.
involving a new tool. So, final question for you, Megan. From a broader perspective, how do you envision the future of exoskeleton technology and its role in shaping the future of work across multiple industries?
I think the limit doesn't exist when it comes to exoskeletons. We talked about all the use cases that have just popped up where it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I think we're just going to continue to see more use cases from a commercial perspective of where this can be implemented. But I'm excited to see also down the road from a consumer perspective. I'd like to see this be something that you can rent from a Home Depot or a Lowe's or any hardware store, just like you would any other tool of, hey, I'm moving next week and I'm going to do all this lifting. I'm going to go rent this so that I'm going to save my back.
That
So
would make
I
that
think,
so much easier.
yeah, from that perspective too, it's exciting to see like where could this go from an everyday user perspective too. And I think the opportunities are endless.
They really are. I didn't even think about moving. Gosh, that would make that so much better. And moving is just miserable. And being able to take that,
No
that would
one
be so
wants to
great
move.
to go. Yeah, nobody wants to realize. But even that, there's another great use cases for people who do moving all day long.
Yep. We have
What
a customer down in DC who's a moving company and they use it.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, well, that's going to wrap us up. I do want to quickly thank our sponsors, Kincannon Business Consulting. Kincannon brings technology, systems, and expertise to your business to shorten the timeline of execution towards a profitable future roadmap. Other consultancies bring a costly army, but Kincannon brings an efficient SWAT team. So if you're looking for a consultancy with a track record of success across many industries, reach out to Kincannon Business Consulting to set up a discussion. You can reach out to them by email at inquire@kincannonbc.com. That's going to do it for today. Megan, thank you so much for being on the show and telling us more about the German Bionic exoskeleton suit. It was super fascinating, and I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for today. We'll talk some more emerging tech next time. Bye, everybody.